Okay, so what are your full names?
Uh, Cynthia Krusell. Your full
Betty
name?
Bates.
All right.
When were you born and where?
I was born in Taunton, Massachusetts, in 1929. Let's see. What was I going to go from
I was born in South Weymouth Hospital. Actually, at that time, I was a resident of Rockland, and I was born January 4th, 1931.
Okay, and how long have you lived in Marshfield?
I've lived in Marshfield my whole life, and although I was technically born in Taunton, where my father lived at that time, Taunton, Massachusetts, I was living in Marshfield, and I've been a resident of Marshfield ever since.
Okay.
I actually was born, as I said, in Rockland, was really South Weymouth. And we summered in Marshfield because my parents and my grandparents were natives of Marshfield and owned a summer cottage at Brant Rock. And so I came here permanently to live in 1954 when I was married.
So,
And I came here and settled. At that time, my parents had built a house on a hill that today is known as Hager Hill, and I came there to live as a baby, and it was a lovely spot overlooking the North River, South River, the watershed area of the North River. And it was up a long driveway and a very, very lovely place to live. And at the foot of our hill was an old house that had belonged to the family named Maycumber, and it was there that down at the foot of the hill where we waited for the bus to go to school. And it was when Marshfield was a very different place than it is today. And it was a very small town, and everybody knew everybody else. And this was particularly true of Marshfield Hills. It was set apart, as it is even today. And it just, at that point, a good many of the people, most of the people that lived in Marshfield Hills were descendants of the Pilgrims. So you could say that the part of Marshfield that I lived in all my life really harked back to the Pilgrim origins of the town of Marshfield.
My family had founded the town of Marshfield when probably in 1636 they began to come here. We do go back to the Winslow family. The brother of Edward, we do not have a line to Edward, but we have a line to Kenelm, which he came on I believe he came on the Mayflower. I'm not sure whether Kenelm came on the Mayflower. I think he came on the second boat.
Yeah, he did.
Yeah. Actually, they settled in North Marshfield and Pembroke and the Situate and the general area. Of course, the towns were not there then. It was just an open land. But actually, Marshfield was started in various sections of the town.
So you went into Ancestry, but what do you think is the biggest misconception of the Pilgrims and early settlers?
well, I think they're always depicted as sort of sailing up to the shore and stepping ashore on the Plymouth Rock, and um, and my family go back to them uh, in several. Well, I think I have 6 lines to the to the Pilgrims, but let's see, I'm a little off the direction here. Anyway,
Actually, I go back to the Mayflower, proven lines that I've proved myself, to 13 of the original people on the Mayflower 36 times, because people had to marry their next door neighbor. There weren't other people coming in that first year. So the very first year was the hardest year, I suppose. Then very often they married their next door neighbor who happened to be a cousin. So intermarriage was a very common thing back then.
yes, I was when I was contemplating these questions that you've asked, I got to thinking about the school I originally went to, being the so-called Old North School, although at that point it was just the North School. And today it's where the fire department is in Marshfield Hills. But that was where I went to school. It was a 2-room schoolhouse with 6 classes, 3 in one room and 3 in the other. And it was a wonderful little school where you had a lot of chance to learn gradually yourself at your own pace, because there would be one teacher for these 3 classes, and so you could move up and do the 2nd grade work or the 3rd grade work, and it was well, you wouldn't find it today. When my class graduated from Marshfield High School, there were 40 of us. That's all. By the time my grandson Peter, my son Peter, graduated, there were 400 kids in his class. Just to give you an idea of how the town has grown, and grown very. It's a very, very different place today. And there were certain turning points that helped the progression of the town. And of course, with every passing day, history was being made in the farms and little mill houses, and the life of the people that went on there.
So why did your families move to Marshfield?
Well, my family didn't need to move here because they were here. But they it all went back to a Hager ancestor that moved here as a doctor, and that generation was Dr. Joseph Hager. And then the next generation would be my father's generation, and they all participated in the town in many ways, helped in the growth of it as it went along. Then, let me see, in later generations, my ancestors were not only teachers, but there was the doctor group, and then there was people that were selectmen of the town, and so they became very involved in the town from the beginning. All that is from the beginning of their era here.
My family, of course, basically, probably almost all of them came on the Mayflower, and they were gradually involved in the development of the town. From the very beginning, they became selectmen. They became uh, probably almost all the posts that were formed were held by the local people. And there were so few local people that everyone had a chance to be a community at that particular moment in history. Marshfield actually has progressed so much over the years. It's very hard to even conceive of how small and what your duty was to the town. Today, people, they don't think of serving any town post or saving anything particular because somebody else will do the job for you. But I feel that responsibility to do something in your town is very important.
Okay, let me see. So, let's see where we're going.
Could you clarify which Pilgrim families you descend from?
Well, I have lines to the to Stephen Hopkins was one of them, and he was quite an important pilgrim. You don't hear much about him, but he became their he kept the treasury, and he wasn't very honest about it, and he eventually got kind of caught up in a scandal of the proper and honest, around that use of the funds for the Pilgrims. So that's Stephen Hopkins. Well, let me see. Elder Brewster, who was the spiritual leader of the Pilgrims at Plymouth. Let me see. There's about 4 Rogers. Thank you, Rogers, and several others, and some of the early founders that did not come on the Mayflower, but came over on the successive boats that did, and they would be families like the Rogers. Oh no, not the Rogers. It would be the Thomases. In particular, I'm talking about the Thomases because they came over not on the Mayflower, but shortly thereafter, and have been instrumental in the town for many years, and there are still Thomases around, and I think Betty too, both go back to the original William Thomas.
Yeah.
Who the Thomases lived where the Daniel Webster house is today, and became very, very famous in different roles during the Revolution, and in time as time went on.
I go back, the Magoon and the Sampson family. My mother was a Sampson. Actually, my father was a Magoon who came a little bit later on, but we go back, they went back to common ancestors, meaning John Alden, Priscilla Alden, the White family, Brewster, Bradford. Actually, I could go on forever because they were such an old family, and they did intermarry, and which was fine. It it developed into this wonderful sort of pilgrim spirit that the early people refer to today, or people today refer to as the original settlers of the town. So it's a very comforting feeling to feel secure that you belong here, you belong in Duxbury, you belong in Marshfield, you belong in Plymouth. And Situate is a little bit further north for me, but I'm sure I had ancestors that settled there also. So it's a very interesting heritage that we have. Cynthia and I are probably related time after time again, over again, something we didn't know until we began to do our own genealogy.
How would you describe Pilgrim spirit?
The Pilgrim spirit.
Yeah.
I guess I maybe just described a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
The feeling of unity, maybe.
What are more of your earliest memories in Marshfield?
What are some of
What was that?
What are some of your earliest memories in Marshfield?
Oh, my earliest memories. Well, I remember quite a lot of my childhood. We lived, we lived right beside my grandparents, and well, I was that sort.
Describe your earliest
Yeah.
memories.
Oh yeah. So my earliest memories would be in being in the woods a lot. We lived, well, as I say, up a long driveway. It's half a mile long. And I had an older brother who was crazy about nature and birds and wildlife, and made his whole life around working for on governmental levels of the environmental aspect of things. And anyway, I remember. How do I remember? I remember the 4th of July, the year that we put on our own 4th of July up on Haker Hill, and my father ran the show. But in those days, of course, the firecrackers were not what they are today, and so we had an array of interesting firefighting things. Actually, not firefighting as much as just fun with fire. The fun with fire things, and but I remember that very well. I remember well, up the church was very central to the to living in Marshfield. There was a church in each of the areas of the town, what we call the villages, and so I remember a lot that went on at the church. My grandfather was a sort of, well, for a Unitarian church, he was very liberal, and let me see what else was I going. It's my own memories. So a lot of them are my childhood memories. Playing with my brother. He was 3 years older than I, and we spent a lot of time in the woods, as I said. We camped out a lot, made us have bedrolls, and just felt very much like the Indians of former days. And anyway, I have other memories of my childhood.
My
Catching
earliest
turtles.
childhood memories were at the beach, because I lived a little bit inland as a child. So mine was coming to the beach in the summer, and it was wonderful. There was sand dunes, and There weren't many people down there. It was a very small community at that particular time. And it was freedom that you could go out the door and go to the beach without even thinking about it. You just walk out the door and 10 steps, you'd be on this beautiful beach. And the beautiful beach was Ocean Bluff because there wasn't a rock on the beach in those days. It was total sand and it was marvelous. So, but I think a lot of my memories were memories of my mother and father in early Marshfield because they talked about it a lot. Our conversations were usually in the back seat of the car. On Sundays, we would come down to Marshfield, take my grandfather out in the car, and we'd drive around Marshfield. And he'd point out this house and that house. Either he had built the house himself or he knew people who lived there. He was deacon of the Baptist church, and the little Baptist church was founded in about 1798. And it housed the community of North Marshfield, Pembroke, and parts of Duxbury. And people would walk from Marshfield Hills to go to the Baptist church. They'd walk in the wintertime. And that, of course, eventually the churches were built to house the people from Marshfield Hills. The Baptists had a second Baptist church because it was too far to walk. So many of those, my memories, were memories that they had. And they talked about a lot. It was the schools that they went to. And it actually became the basis of really my love of Marshfield history, was really due to my mother and father and their love of the Marshfield history, because it was such an intricate part of their life. There was no other life outside of Marshfield. There wasn't the New York, there wasn't Boston, it was just Marshfield.
Did you two know each other in childhood?
No.
No, not in childhood. We met sometime later. Well, when we were when our kids were little.
Actually, we were young mothers together in Marshfield with young children. And my youngest son, Alan, he was born after Cynthia came into my life. But my oldest son went to school first grade with Nancy and her daughter. So no, but that was the basis of our getting together. We were actually the children.
How were your families involved in the town?
Oh yes.
Oh.
Okay, let me catch. Yeah, well, in the earlier generations, as I say, we had doctors and ministers, so they were very involved in those activities of the town. My uncle was a selectman. Let me see. I had an uncle, well, the same uncle, who was involved in environmental affairs, for that matter, saving the town for this and that. And when he was on the school committee, he and the 4 others that were on that committee really hired the teachers and set up the school system as we know it today. Well, it's quite different today, but it's evolved from those early days when people in the community ran whatever the little community effort was. There was a library that they established in the hills, along with one that was downtown. And then we had a store where everybody gathered. There was a great sense of community that everybody knew everybody else, and you fit in somewhere.
I guess my family, they took part in the local government right straight from the beginning, right on up to the fact up to the time maybe of 1900. After 1900, I believe, my grandfather was deacon of the Baptist church for years and years and years. And he was also the local mortician. And he not only was he a carpenter and built the caskets in the barn of his house, he would lay the people out. And he was a sort of a local mortician. So the involvement of everyone was really needed to keep the town going, to move the town ahead. Everyone had to be involved. It was a very important time period, the latter part of 1900, because the young people were beginning to move away from Marshfield. There was more opportunity in places like Boston, other places across the country, that they might make more of a part, more of a life. The money might be more. There was not much industry except the milling, and my family, they were involved in the Magoon Mill. Was established in the early 1800s, which ran right up until 1940, a boxboard building and that type of thing. But that was a very local industry. So if you were an engineer or if you had great ambitions, perhaps you left Marshfield. So the town was ever evolving.
What was your grandfather's name?
Isaac Winslow Magoon.
Do you have any memories of World War II?
Oh, yes.
Well, although
Big memories.
yeah, big memories.
It actually was the basis of establishing, when we were in school, our generation was perhaps very much influenced by World War II. Go ahead. We at the beach, during the World War II, we sat right next to a 35 millimeter gun that was all sandbagged, and the Coast Guard would patrol the beaches in Marshfield. They would walk every 4 hours along the beach, and it was guarding the beach. Not only did we have local wardens and people that were involved in protecting our coastline, which was very vulnerable to the Germans during World War II. So our generation was very much influenced. I was very much influenced by the Coast Guard walking in their white, beautiful uniforms. I was probably about 14 at the time, or 12 or 14. But they actually defined our generation. We rolled bandages. We did all sorts of things to help the servicemen during the war. And of course, we expected the worst because we were very vulnerable right here on the beach. Not only did we have ammunition manufacturing close by, Hanover, the town of Hanover, had one of the largest ammunition plants in the country right here. Not only was it there, it was involved in Hingham, and Four River Shipyard was very important, building ships.
Mm-hmm.
So we were extremely vulnerable here, and we would have air raid warnings in school where we'd dive under our desk. And one time they spotted an unknown airplane overhead, and we were all sent home from school. But it was a time that you were very much aware of what was happening in Europe.
And we had to take all kinds of protections against the enemy. And we folded bandages for the soldiers and sent care packages to the front. And right at home, we were reminded of the war all the time by the fact we had to black out every night. We had to have black shades on our windows, and we had total blackouts, as well as the the automobiles. We had to blacken out the top half of the windows, and then we came kind of face to face with the war one night when we were sitting around in the house that, as I say, looked right out at Fourth Cliff, where there was a naval station, and so we were very aware that the Germans were right offshore, and their German subs were out there. And we were very aware of it day after day. And then one morning we were sitting around, and there came a knock at the front door, and it was a local policeman asking if he could have a look at our house. And in he came, and he walked around through the house, and anyway, it came to be that I had a closet in my room that had a light in the closet, and I would go into the to get undressed every night, and about the same time, and
Get John out the window.
Yeah, that's so. So the local people, the local policeman had spotted the fact that this light was coming on in this house that overlooked the mouth of the river and the Coast Guard station, and they noticed that there was a light going on about the same time. Anyway, they thought that they thought that we were sending messages to the Germans, to the German submarines. So that brought it right close to us, and I think that the Second World War was very, very. We were all very aware of it, more than by far more than people who had lived inland and weren't aware with what was going on right at their doorstep, so to speak. So anyway.
What? Do you need water?
Pardon me?
Do you need water?
No? Do you want water?
Sure, I'll have a little water. Good idea.
Do you need water too?
No, that's all right.
Was there any
Sounds
other
like you're running out of
Any
water.
Probably it is.
Well, we also had a lot of rationing. We'd have to stand in line for 1 pound of hamburger or butter. Butter was rationed. And there'd be long lines in the supermarket.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mm.
And when the war was over, actually, we were actually in 2 world wars here, the Pacific War and the European War. And so we had to go through both the ending of both the Pacific and the European War. And celebrations were great. One of them I specifically remember was the whole town of Marshfield turned out down at Brant Rock during the summertime to celebrate it. I mean, it was exciting. I mean, people are screaming and hollering in the streets. But actually, a lot of people never came back from World War II, the European and the Japanese War. It was a very Gold Star mothers that had lost a son in the war were honored, and President Roosevelt at that time, everything we would sit listening to the radio. Our only means of communication was a radio, and run by a battery, because half the time we were in a blackout, and not only did a blackout mean that we didn't have any lights, we had no electricity. And particularly at the beach, they'd shut it off for so many hours a day because we were trying to save on electricity also. So things were very difficult. There were difficult years growing up with all this happening.
Does anything stand out to you about the time after World War II?
Let me say that would be the late
The time
40s,
after.
the late 40s. And
I don't
beginning
think
of
there
the
was
50s.
anything. We were so happy to have the war over, to have the boys home from Europe. Everything was to get the boys home, get the men home, but we always called them boys, to get them back. And they did come back. And of course, they came back, and with many of them injured. But it was a happy time for them, because along came certain things like the GI Bill, which lasted right up almost to not too many years ago. The GI Bill, they went off to college free, which was a wonderful gift. We gave a whole generation of young men the chance to become doctors, lawyers, school teachers that perhaps never would have had an opportunity to go to college, but there it was free for them. And we were so pleased to have them home that it was an exciting time.
What about the 1960s? Does anything stand out to you about that time?
The 1960s.
Well, in the 1960s, we were dating some of these men that had served in the military. I mean, the guys coming home produced this whole generation of happy people. They wanted to buy a house. They needed a house. Many of our little housing projects began after World War II, because during the war, no one was able to build a house. There were no building materials available. You couldn't buy lumber. You couldn't buy bricks. You couldn't buy anything until the war was over. And then the building boom began. And that's what we went through is developments in all these little towns. Marshfield, not so much then as a little bit later on, but places like Hanover, Rockland, Brockton, Quincy were chosen to by local builders, once they could get a hold of the material, to build these very small little houses to house the new generation of children coming along. Because the war being over, we had a boom with families. People were getting married and having families. It was a sort of a glorious, happy time.
That's so true.
So, thank you.
Wow.
Have we come to a point where you want to do something else?
I'm just asking. Huh? No. I don't mean to stop it. I mean, I'm asking you a question.
I was just like, pause it.
We can edit this out. It's not like, and we can edit that. What about I think like the biggest Cold War event that comes to mind, that it might not have had an impact up here, but the Cuban Missile Crisis. Did anything stand about that? No, particularly.
About what?
Cuban Missile. No, I don't think so.
No.
I don't think for us, it probably, for our generation, probably that was not as important as the war being over.
Yeah.
Yes.
Do you
Go
want
ahead.
Go on.
Well, no, I do. I was remembering a couple of other things about the war. I remember we had a boy and had, I think he was, well, how old? Anyway, a boy that was killed during the war when we were in high school, and they had a flag ceremony out by the end. I can see it today. The, at the Grace Rider School, which was then the high school, and I remember that service. Really, that brought it right home to us too when we had people. I mean, boys that were had lost their lives. There was something else you said. I can't think of it. So, where are we to the 60s,
Yeah.
the 70s?
Well, the last quarter of the 20th century, so the 70s, 80s, 90s. Does anything stand out about that?
Oh my goodness. Oh, definitely. But we've sort of skipped over our early years here in Marshfield, where we're having children and, becoming involved in town politics. We became more aware of the needs of Marshfield. The growth of Marshfield was tremendous from 1960 on, when we began to have this new expressway that was beginning to come out of down the coastline, following the old Route 50, 3. It was the old Route 3. They were building a new Route 3. And of course, in Boston, what was going on, there was a busing crisis. And they began to integrate the school system in a different sort of way than it had been integrated. And so many people did not want to live in Boston. They wanted to come out to the suburbs. So what do we have here in Marshfield? We had a wonderful summer population of houses that have been vacant in the wintertime. And in the summertime, of course, they were filled by families that lived in the suburbs of Boston that wanted to get out here. And of course, these people would be moving to Marshfield. Well, of course, Marshfield had a school crisis at this time, because going from this small community, we didn't have the buildings. So they began to be having to go to town meeting and raise money for the building of schools. And this was a tax crisis for the local towns. Hanover was the same way, Pembroke was the same way. So it became a very different kind of community. We had people moving in. We had whole sections of town that actually were being thought of as something very extremely different than we had experienced. So we had a lot of people, particularly the Irish from Boston. They wanted to move out here, and they did. Many of them that had owned summer cottages came as year-round residents. So schools were overburdened at this particular time. And thank goodness we had a lot of men who had been teachers. And in college after World War II, we had an abundance of teachers that could move to Marshfield. Maine became a wonderful place to go up to the University of Maine and say, the superintendent, as he did, he went up there and he said, come to Marshfield. We'll give you $300 more than than you're even asking for if you come down as a group. We have many teachers that came at that time to fill the vacancies, or not vacancies, the places we needed them here in town. So Marshfield was beginning to experience a lot of change. Then, of course, you had a change with the religious orientation. This meant a lot of Catholics from Boston needed churches. I mean, we only had one Catholic church, well, maybe two. Maybe there was one in Humrock during the summertime.
Temporary, right.
And they were very small, little temporary churches. Well, so we needed churches being built. So you had your Catholic church expanding greatly here in town. So our population was a little different than it had been, whereas Marshfield basically was a Protestant town to begin with, became exceedingly more Catholic as time went on. So that's typical of the 1960s. By 65, we had the expressway open, and in came all sorts of things. Businesses began to grow. The change was tremendous. From then on, we've always been quite a different town than we were before 1965. I believe
That's right.
I believe it probably went on for the next 20 years, maybe 30 years. So today we have this huge school system. I'm not sure how many students, Connor, were in your graduating class.
About 300.
How many?
300.
800.
300.
Oh my goodness. That's a lot more than what, 25 years before that was probably 400.
No, 300.
300. Oh, 300. Well, so that was the growth of Marshfield. Then you had a growth of a lot of organizations you needed in town. Marshfield began to grow in many different ways. Summer population was probably more stable at that particular time than it had been, say, 20 years before that.